I'll jump in.
Okay.
Just following on some of your comments from noon about some ministers penning some op-eds and whatnot. Wondering what kind of support you think the province could provide to help improve downtown?
Well, the good news is that we have just about completed our overarching downtown strategy, which will be coming to council in the next month or so. And we'd be really happy to share with them all the work that we've done and the conclusions we've come to, and encourage them to financially participate in the implementation of it.
Is that coming up with strategy in a couple weeks?
No, I think it's coming to PFC, but I can't remember if it's coming to the March or April meeting.
So a provincial role in that strategy is basically bring a check.
Very much so. I mean, the strategy is going to be very expensive. It's going to come with an ask for the city, but there's a lot more to do beyond that.
Will that be over and above OSIP?
Yes, quite different.
You're starting to spill the beans here. So
That's about all I can say.
I was going to say, how does money change the equation?
Well, things like, for example, you will have seen that paper from the University of Calgary School of Public Policy that talks about incentives we could give to people to help them redevelop or transition existing office buildings. Those are the kinds of things we're getting into now.
One thing I guess I will ask about is we're talking about vaccines. We're going to see Councillor Davis's motion later today, I guess.
Right after the break, I
We're
think.
going to make it. Have you had any additional conversations with the province recently about whether certain sectors might be prioritized? Is this
I have not, but I'll be interested to ask Chief Henry that question because she sits on the vaccine task force. The provincial government went a certain way in which they just went by age, and they would have had the ability in phase 2 under federal guidelines to also look at risk factors, people who are higher at risk, whether they are people with pre-existing conditions, which they did include, or if they're people who have to deal with the public a lot and can't stay safe. And they chose not to do that, but certainly if council passes this motion today, that's something that we'll be looking at advocating for.
How do you think the city has done in trying to protect frontline workers, people who do have face-to-face roles with the public, quite honestly?
Well, as an employer, we've been lucky that we are a large employer and we have the resources to look after people, and we've had very, very small numbers of city employees getting infected, lower than the general population. But that's not true of all frontline workers. And certainly I think folks who work in a grocery store, for example, may want to say, look, I should be ahead in the queue. But from the city's perspective, we're really advocating for our colleagues who deal with the public every day.
A question about the enforcement discussion we had this morning.
Yes.
About the authority. Right now, with no authority for the police officers, how concerning is this for you to get this back on track ASAP?
I think it's important. It's not a critical issue. I think that we only issued a couple of tickets in the last couple of weeks, but it is important, and especially when we see rallies like are going on that went on this weekend. Certainly, our peace officers were there keeping the peace, but they couldn't actually write tickets, and it puts them in a difficult position.
Do you want to see better line of sight on that in terms of the clarity? Like there's an event here last Saturday. By the time they complete their enforcement work, they say, in relation to that event on Saturday, we have issued X number of tickets.
Yeah, I'd like to see that actually, because it's hard to follow the bouncing ball on this. I totally get that you may not want to write tickets at the events because that could be escalating. And they're pretty good about following up, but I'd like that to be a little more obvious.
Why do you think that's important?
I just think people need to know that the stuff is not going unenforced. Even there's a church in southeast Calgary, and I know the neighbors are really upset because they're not seeing any enforcement going on. But I actually myself don't know if enforcement has gone on after the fact there or not.
When the ministerial order was issued, enforcement was kind of like a big topic of conversation. People were wondering, I guess, since that happened, and over the last few months, have you noticed a change in maybe compliance since that those conversations were happening?
Yeah, in my opinion, things were actually going very nicely. The police and the peace officers and the Alberta Health Services inspectors were really working together well. And despite the anti-mask rallies, compliance has been actually quite good. Though I have started to hear just in the last little while that people are starting to get abusive with store staff again, and I'll say, as I've said many times, don't take it out on the teenager making minimum wage at the store. That's not a nice thing to do. It's rude. Try to be a little more humane. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.